Welcome, Lenny. Welcome to Let's Talk Digital Marketing.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having us on.
And just to tell the viewers and listeners a bit about you. So, your website, marketingoutsource.co.uk.
That's right. Yep.
Uh, and, and on the website, it says you've had 29,000 plus hours of marketing experience.
That's correct. Yeah. So that is
Pretty impressive.
yeah. Thanks. Yeah. That's come primarily from the fact that my main job that I've had throughout my career has been marketing. So starting in graphic design and working my way through marketing roles into management. And that 29,000 plus hours represent roughly about 17 years of experience. So
Yeah,
so 29,000 sounds way more exciting.
yeah. So the 17 years ago,
Hmm.
that was 224 now. So that's 2007.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
So how were things then? What was the landscape like then for marketing when you
Well,
started?
it's yeah. I mean, it's obviously it was very different. I mean, there was a lot less what I'd call it regulation. So there was a lot less regulation around things that people would do. So like my greatest example would be email marketing. Back then it was still pretty much the Wild West. And over the years, I think it was 2014, you had GDPR came in, which obviously only applies to Europe and the UK, but it really put some great guidance in for companies to try and stop a little bit of the cowboy approach, basically, which is great. And then more recently, in the last couple of months, we've had the DMARC certification as well for sending emails, which was always available. This is the funny thing. A lot of people didn't know that was always, you could always add that. And it would always improve your deliverability. But now it's now a requirement rather than a nice to have. So yeah, so you had a lot of things like that. There was a lot more direct marketing back then. So direct through the mail, mail pieces, and also a lot more telesales, a lot more agencies picking up the phone and ringing, on your behalf, and that seems to have it's still around, but it's gone away a little bit. The direct telesales, it's seen as a lot more spammy than it used to be.
Mm.
Yeah, direct mail, I'm still a massive fan of. I used to work for a mailing company, so obviously I've got a little kind of place in my heart for it. But where email was taken over 90%, 90% of all communications, in that way, there's a real niche there for direct marketing now. Because you think yourself as a business, how many things do you receive on a daily basis through the post? Not many, but
Yeah,
on most days, none at all. And so if somebody sends you their offer through the post in an imaginative way, chances are you're going to read it. And so I see that making a bit of a comeback.
yeah. That is so true. That is so true. Uh, and I did notice on your CV as well that we work with some big companies.
Yeah, yeah. And
Sainsbury's stands out.
say that again. Sorry.
Sainsbury's.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So that was yeah. So that's That was a fortunate meeting of minds. That one. So I actually they always say it's who you know, not what you know. Well, I know stuff, but I did also know somebody who had moved into a role within Sainsbury's head office, and so they had been working with an agency who had not been providing everything they wanted, and they were looking to bring in additional resource, and they knew that I'd started up a business a few years ago and engaged with me, and yeah, I was able to just slot straight in and start providing some deliver some projects for them internally. And it was all based around training sessions and award ceremonies and things like that. So it was it's a great creative exercise. Every time we
Yeah,
do something, it's pushing my boundaries, and it's really great.
yeah. Because what made you take the jump then from working for someone else to starting your own marketing business?
So I'd been so when I was an employee, I always had a real interest in business and potentially working for myself. I had several what you call side hustles. It's quite a well-known term now. And what happened was COVID. And so I was working for a Swiss company at the time, and they'd, like many corporations, took the opportunity to furlough their staff and have their wages paid. And on the first day of furlough, I thought, well, there's one or two things I can do. I can either take all this information that I've learned and try and start a business, or I can watch Netflix for 8 months. So both were very, enticing. But what really pushed me over the edge was that I have quite a big network on LinkedIn, and I approached all of my recruitment consultant connections. And the first bit of bad news was sort of 9 out of 10 of them were furloughed as well. So that was a red flag. And then the ones that were left were like, we don't know what's going to happen or how long it might take to find another job if yours doesn't, come back. So that was it. Just decided on that day I was going to create, basically take my saleable skills and offer them to my network. And a conversation I had with my MD the day I was furloughed was that he had to furlough all these staff, but still was asked to keep the business running. So that was my initial, for the first year of me trading, that was my hook. It was, have you had to furlough your staff, but you've still got a business to run? And that allowed me to get past the first 12, 18 months.
Wow. So COVID, for you, like many others, was a game changer.
Yeah, I'm one of those annoying people that actually thought it was a good thing.
Yes, I must admit, I have the same opinion. But for me, obviously, it wasn't for everyone.
No, that's right. No, I mean, for a lot of people, it was horrific. And even for me, at the time when they started talking about furlough, I didn't even know what furlough meant, to be honest with you. And then when I looked it up, no, that's it. And when I looked it up and found out what was going on, I was like, well, this doesn't sound good. There's definitely a scenario coming that is not good. And also, I mean, back then I'd only just bought a house as well.
Yeah.
So that had happened like about 12 months previous. So we were right at the beginning of a new mortgage, and it's like, the whole thing was very up in the air for right at the beginning. But yeah, I decided to dig myself out of it.
Yeah. Are you a big networker?
Yes, yeah, huge. In fact, that was the defining thing that allowed me to be successful. So when I first, day one of my self-imposed self-employment, I'm thinking to myself, right, I've got pretty good LinkedIn network already, but a lot of it was built as an employee. So a lot of the contacts were contacts for the companies that I work for, so it wasn't a very targeted group of people. And so the first two things that I did was, where do I find new people that are in my right sphere of influence? That's networking groups. So that was great. So first of all, I researched who's doing networking. Turns out everyone, because that was the one thing you could do that was business related, that was online, and the COVID restrictions didn't have any impact. So that was brilliant. So I joined a whole bunch of networking groups up and down the country. And then what I realized very quickly was that this is the best way to find people that you're looking for. So you go to, I created by accident, to be honest, I'll be very honest, it was an accident. I created a funnel approach, and basically all it was, and this sounds very simple, all it was just go to networking, meet a whole bunch of new people, add them to my LinkedIn, arrange a one-to-one, have a chat, and then just provide people with value by me posting or being helpful or connecting the dots, referring jobs, that kind of thing. Now, I'm sure loads of people do that, but there's one part of that that's really important, and that's the following up. So I see all the time people go to networking, and there's a room full of, let's say, 30 to 40 people, and you get to pitch yourself for 60 seconds. And then you maybe, depending on the group, go into a side room where you'll talk to 1, 2, or 3 other people. And then you might do that twice, and you may meet 8 people in a limited format of about 2 minutes. Then you leave the networking, and you might then follow up with the people you met but then there's another 30 odd people on the table there who you might never see again. And so that's where I saw the opportunity. And so what I would do is make a note of everyone in the networking group, and I'd follow up every single person. And my first approach would be find them on LinkedIn, add them on, send them a message and say, saw you on this group. Would be great. We didn't get to talk. Would be great to meet you and find out more about you and your business. Simple as that. 99 times out of 100, they'll reply and say, that's great, set up a meeting, and then we'll have a one-to-one. Then in the one-to-ones, I then don't talk about, I make a conscious effort to not talk about myself. So I consider a great first one-to-one is if we could talk about the other person for the whole amount of time. And if we get to the end and they say, oh my God, I didn't even ask you about your business, that's perfect. Because I want the other person to feel like as important and valued as possible. And you find out all kinds of exciting and interesting things as well beyond the business side. And then because they're then on the LinkedIn, then on your LinkedIn network, I then say, well, now I like to provide you with value. So I'll say, if you're out there and you're posting and you're creating your content, if you need help and you need extra reach and you want access to my contacts, anytime you make a post, tag me in, because I'm on LinkedIn more than I'm off LinkedIn. And I said, I'll always like, comment and post and share, and I'll help you out. And then my content that I post is all value based. So it's all just giving people ideas, tips, hints, all that kind of stuff. And so what that does is that creates a positive, what I call like a positive karma. And then the more I do this, the more I help people, the more I find help comes back to me in the form of referrals or introductions or things like that. And just by deploying that for the first 12 months, that basically helped me build the business up, and I've been doing it ever since. And it's a brilliant approach. And people listening might think, well, there's no real special sauce there, but there is. The special sauce is A, following every single person up from that networking group, and B, making the one-to-one about them initially. And those two things make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That is gold. It sounds very simple,
Yeah,
but it's so powerful.
and it's often that 1% change. So the 1% change in this case is maybe talking about them in a one-to-one, or the other 1% change might be that instead of walking away from that group and forgetting about 30 people out of 40, you follow them all up. Some of them might decline, some of them might not end up being a connection, but in my experience, if you're B2B and you're having conversations with businesses, 9 times out of 10 you'll get a connection, and it will eventually will turn into something as well.
Yeah.
And it takes the pressure off selling as well, because you're not trying to sell to these people, you're just trying to build relationships.
Yeah.
The selling comes later, and it's probably you're not even selling to the person you've built the relationship with. You're possibly down the track selling to somebody they know who has been referred back to you through this relationship that you've built.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting too, when you were talking to Carlton, you were discussing the difference between marketing and sales.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And there's usually a big wedge between the two.
Yeah. So you had your marketing hat on when you were networking, not necessarily the sales.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So the marketing, networking is for me, but as a marketeer, obviously I lean into that side of things. But I think that when you're because I would call it prospecting. You're looking to build your network. You're not prospecting for sales. You're prospecting for relationships and connections and opportunities. That's what I would definitely class as the marketing side. The sales part comes when that great network provides you with an opportunity. And this is what a lot of people will call luck, where opportunity meets preparedness. You're prepared because you have a business, you've got services, prices, you're ready to help. and then you're creating the opportunity by using that funnel approach. And then when the two come together, that's when you get great. That's when great things happen. And in my experience, referrals are always the best projects that you can work on, because it's a warm introduction. You've got a lot of good faith when you begin, and they're just the best. Referrals are the best leads.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned posting on LinkedIn.
Mm.
Do you have any tips on how to, what to post and how often to post on LinkedIn?
Yeah. Well, the how often is very individual. So, I've been using a system for the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm actually right now exclusive working on a whole new approach. So maybe we'll talk about that on a future. But at the moment, what's worked for me is I did a lot of testing. So I did a lot of testing on trying to understand the algorithm, and trying to work out what types of posts my network actually react to and like and want more of, and then also how often can I pester people without them getting fed up with me. And for me, and again, it's individual, but for me, two posts a week, with a heavy lean on tips and tricks, as in, how to do this marketing thing in your business, how to get going. Here's what you should be looking at. These are the tools that you should use. And, that those sort of things seem to produce the most interest, the most engagement, and the most inquiries. That could be, but that's different for every company. Yeah. So depending on your industry and your makeup of your network, it can be quite different. On the algorithm side, I took several courses from several different people who had several different approaches, and then amalgamated what I thought were the best parts of every approach into a new approach. And that included things, not only days, times, and types of posts, but also things like the correct use of hashtags, the correct use of @s for companies, learning about things like dwell time, which is when you post it. So there's a phenomenon called a pod, where people will join a WhatsApp group and they'll post at the same time on the same day, and everybody will like and comment on everybody else's, right? LinkedIn frown upon this kind of thing, but so they introduced a thing called dwell time, which is that if you post and then somebody immediately jumps on and likes and comments, it screams to the algorithm, this is a setup. So, learning about those little tiny things, and also the fact that if you tag somebody into a post, if they don't respond in any way, like or comment within like 90 minutes, then you get a down rate for your engagement instead of an up rate, and things like that, where the algorithm will assume that what you've written is not interesting to the person that you tagged, and just like little and bobs that do have a huge impact. So so there's a lot of them, but that's just a few examples of how I've managed to build up a good network.
Is that one of the services you outsource?
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, what happened was that I didn't originally, but where people were enjoying the content and they were seeing me on a consistent basis, and they liked what they saw the engagement. They then said, do you do this for other people? And so then I started to take on clients, and now we have a full end-to-end service where we just literally take over your LinkedIn account entirely, everything right up to engagement. We don't reply to comments, because I think that's disingenuous. I think that needs to be done by the person, because they've got the knowledge, it's their business, and they should be engaging directly. So, but it's been very popular.
And you also work on other social media platforms too, like Facebook and Instagram.
I don't work on I don't work on Facebook and Instagram at the moment, but it is something that I'm really interested in. And there's a few people around who I've seen who do that. I'll give you a live example of what sparked my interest. Was that recently I came up with a really interesting idea for web designers, where I offer an SEO package, but web designers historically just like to do the designing part, and so they'll build the website out, and then there'll be a conversation at some point, either before the build or after the build, where somebody says, usually before the build, and the designer will say, why are you building this website or redesigning this website? And invariably the answer will be, because we want to generate more traffic and inquiries. And so then there's an awkward conversation about, yes, this is the beginning of the journey, but SEO is the real, way that you would drive that kind of what you're looking for. And normally they won't offer that service, and so they'll either have to say no, sorry, or they'll know someone and they can refer it on for goodwill, basically. And so I came up with a way of helping them to deliver it, but also building up a bit of a passive income stream as well. And so I was recommended, getting back to Facebook, I was recommended a group on Facebook. And I don't really use Facebook, to be honest, for my market. I just use LinkedIn. But on this recommendation, I joined this group. I posted this offer, what I've just described to you, and within 12 hours, I'd booked 21 one-to-ones.
Wow.
With web designers who had read the story and then had, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I encounter with every single client, and so that was a big uptake. So, so it's a bit of a, Facebook in particular has been something I've almost ignored on purpose, but now I've been shown that used correctly, there's some great opportunity.
Yeah. Were you posting as a business or as an individual?
Business. Yeah, well, it's my individual account, but what I've done with my actual own individual account is that I've made it business related. So my header is my business. So it is my personal account, but it was me talking about my business. So a bit of both, really.
Yeah. And what are your views on going back to LinkedIn?
Yes.
What are your views on using the pro version of LinkedIn?
Well, interestingly, yeah. So interestingly, I've never liked the pro version because I think it's enormously overpriced for what it is compared to similar things on other platforms. And the only two things that I could really see that it was a benefit for is, one, access to Sales Navigator. But I've got ways and means of almost replicating Sales Navigator without needing it. And then but then beyond that, they started to cover up the people that have looked at your profile, which is annoying, but it's not the end of the world. But recently they've changed it again. And so now you're now limited to the number of people that you can send a connection request to with it. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah, and it's a different amount for each person depending on your activity. So mine is 5 a month. I know some people 10 a month or even 15 a month. If you pay, it's unlimited again. So they're starting to constrict basic functionality now, which I personally think is a horrible decision. Now I think they can get away with it because there's no competitor. So there's no LinkedIn 2.0. So they can get away with it. But I think what would be a more sensible approach would be to have tiered membership and have the base membership be a nominal amount, say £7.50, £10 a month. But everybody who uses the platform has to pay.
Yeah.
Even if you want basic functionality, you have to pay. And I think what that would do is that would get rid of time wasters, that would get rid of bot accounts, which they have a really, a real problem with. And that you've then got a real solid community of people who are paying to be there. And then you could then have another, maybe a second and a third tier that gives you advertising or something like that in with it. But I think millions of £10 would be better than what is probably tens, maybe tens of thousands of £60.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my feeling. I mean, I don't work for LinkedIn, so I don't have the numbers. I'm just assuming. But to me, that feels like that would be a better approach.
Sure. And what would your advice be to like a small business that was just starting out? They need to get their brand awareness going. They need sales, obviously,
Yeah.
at that point yet.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is, from a business point of view, is to keep your costs to an absolute minimum. Now, I know, again, seems simple enough, but actually, costs, as I've found over the last 3.5 years, can, if you take your eye off them, can spiral out of control. And I think there's an awful lot of opportunity now to build, like a one-page website with a web builder. To get yourself online, get your tent pole built, even if it's just one page and a contact page, and you've done it yourself and it's just okay, that's fine. Get yourself on LinkedIn, build yourself a LinkedIn page that tells everyone what you do, and then start researching ways of communicating your offer in the best way possible. Set yourself up with a schedule and stick to it. So, say to yourself, I'm going to post twice a week at this time on these days. Stick to it. Get yourself a buddy as well. So if you know somebody else in business, doesn't matter whether they're new or not, just get someone who can hold you to account as well. That's very important. And then, as I said at the beginning, start putting yourself about in the networking groups, be that online, virtual, or in person. Just get yourself out there, start talking to people, build a network, build relationships. And that's the first building blocks, really.
Sure. That's great advice.
Because I mean, I know that you could spend an infinite amount of money on tools and other people's services and all of that kind of stuff. But I think just, at the beginning, you won't have access to that kind of budget. So everything's got to be hustle, at the beginning. It's got to be you, and you got to just find the places where the people that you're looking for reside.
Yeah. And with regard to outsourcing, what would be the point where you would start looking at that?
Well, I think at that point, once you've got some business under your belt, I think you then need to make a value judgment of your time versus money. So I'll give you a live example of me. So I outsource. So the way I've built my business is that it's just me in the business. And then I've built, over 3.5 years, a trusted network of very talented freelancers. They're all excellent at what they do. They're all business owners like me. And so that relationship is great, that I'm a figurehead. I go out there, I generate inquiries, and then I use the best people for the job to deliver the projects. Now, I didn't do that at the beginning. At the beginning, I was like, well, I've got saleable skills. I'm going to sell them and I'm going to take all the money. And then what I realized really quickly was I've only got X number of hours in a month, realistically. And so even if I used all of those hours on fulfilling tasks and projects, that leaves me with no time for networking or lead generation or all of that stuff. And it also leaves me with very little free time of my own. And so when I got to that point, that was the value judgment. It's like, what is my time worth to pay somebody else to come in and deliver something that I'll pay them for, and then make a much smaller amount out of than I would charging the full amount. And once I got into that mindset, that's the time. That's at that point when you realize that you can't grow anymore, and you can still make a great business, but by outsourcing jobs that are going to eat up all of your time. You'll know when you get to that point.
Yeah, and that's when they call you.
Well, yes, that's right. That's what I was leading up to. Yeah, so Yeah, so in marketing terms, if somebody has got to the point in their business where, and it doesn't even have to be that they were doing it themselves even, so it might be that they it's something they couldn't even learn, like SEO is a great example. People always refer to it as the dark art and all of that sort of thing. It is very hard to learn. And so, I meet a variety of different people, and some of them fall into that group of, they just have realized that it's not worth them putting the time in themselves because someone else can deliver it and deliver it better. And then there's other people that have tried and failed, couldn't learn the skill. And then there's other people who, like larger companies that have got a strategy in place, they've got a full team, they know exactly what they're doing, but for whatever reason, they've got a really short deadline on a project and they need to bring somebody in who's skilled, can just hit the ground running and add that skill to that team for a month or however long it is, without having to then bring in somebody to the business as an employee.
Yeah, yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah, so it's a nice flexible approach, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to come to the most important part of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to ask you some really pertinent questions.
Okay.
So, what is your favorite food?
Oh, that's easy. I'm a huge fan of Indian cuisine.
Uh,
And not really anything in particular. I like it all. But I think probably if you push me for a dish, I'd say a vegetarian danzak.
ah,
Absolutely my favorite food in the whole of history.
okay. You
Yeah.
heard it here.
And it's not vegetarian because I'm vegetarian. It's just
Yeah.
for some weird reason the vegetarian one and the meat one are completely different.
Ah,
Yeah. And I just prefer the texture of the vegetarian one. There you go. That's a thorough answer.
what's your favorite travel destination?
As in where I've been to or where I'd like to go?
Where you've been to?
Been to. Right, okay, let me think. So I think probably we went to Canada for our honeymoon in 2012. And I would have to say that Vancouver was probably one of my favorite places that I've ever been. Yeah, really great combination of modern and also classical landscape. So obviously it's a city, but it's wrapped in mountains as well, and it's a really cool approach when you come into land, and everything about it is it's just a really chill, creative place, and really enjoyed it there. And we were really lucky as well because we went in September when it was supposed to be raining and it was sunny the whole time. So that
Yeah,
that well,
that sounds great.
yeah, really good.
What would be on your Spotify playlist?
As in music or podcasts?
It could be, well, let's go for music first.
All right then, yeah, okay. So music, I'm a big fan of. So I've got quite an eclectic um taste. So I like a combination of heavy metal, jazz, and pretty much anything from the 80s. So that could include pop music as well. That's really just an age thing, I think, the 80s thing.
Yes, yes, I like the 80s too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all of my favorite 80s films, they all had a really distinctive soundtrack, and that's probably where it came from.
Yeah, yeah. And podcasts, apart from obviously this one would
Yeah.
swap, obviously.
Yes, that's right. This one. Then yeah, also my regular listens are a podcast called Arseblog, which is a podcast about Arsenal.
I'm gonna say,
Yeah, it's been running for quite a long time, 20 years I think now. And that's that, and it's kind of like it's really factual, but with a comedy edge as well. So the guys that do it are very amusing. So that's good. And then also I listened to another one called Those Conspiracy Guys, because I'm a bit of a fan of conspiracy theories and things like that. Which is very pertinent nowadays because I feel like we're just all living in one giant conspiracy now.
yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. And then from a business point of view, I've been listening to a podcast called Entrepreneurial Fire for longer than I can remember. And that I think that was one of the podcasts that first got me into thinking about running a business. And the format is just they have a business owner who's very successful on every week, and they ask them the same group of questions. So you get lots of different perspectives on the same thing. And that's quite a cool listen as well.
Sure. Yeah. And favorite marketing book?
Oh, I think, well, that is a tough one. I think, right, yeah, you could make an argument that this is a little bit marketing, but not really. But my favorite book, I have to say, is No Excuses by Brian Tracy, purely because that was the book that I first read that made me look at my life objectively and say, this isn't good enough. So it's not very, it has marketing elements to it. But really it's more of a kind of it's kind of a self-help book really, but it's very powerful. It's the only book I've ever read that made me, as soon as I finished it, I literally physically stood up and was like, right, I'm gonna do this, and this, and then it led to where we are sitting here today.
Wow.
I recommend anybody read it, regardless of how successful or unsuccessful or whatever you think you are. It's incredibly powerful stuff.
Yeah, I've seen his videos. Yeah, and they're very, very powerful.
Yes, yeah, they are, and the guy has some incredible insight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And finally, favorite quote?
Well, you know what? I have a favorite quote, but I can't tell you who it's by. And I've always had this problem that I love this quote and I can never remember who said it. I know it's an American president, but I can't tell you off the top of my head which one. And it's tied into your question about when do you outsource? And when I heard this quote, it was at a time when I was on that kind of precipice, and I heard this quote and it pushed me the whole way. And it was, try and get it right first time. I'd rather earn 1% of somebody else's effort than 100% of my own. And so as soon as I heard that, because the dilemma is, if I deliver things myself, I get all the money. If I get someone else to do it, I'm sharing it with the other person, and they're getting most of the money. But the mindset is you're not having to do the work, so you're earning less. Not 1%, but you're earning less. But actually, your opportunity is now infinite.
Yeah.
And that quote, and I will look it up after this, and maybe we'll put it in the show notes. That's what pushed me the whole way to embrace the outsourcing approach.
Yeah. Wow. That is a great quote.
Yeah.
If anyone knows and they're watching this, then put it in the comments.
Definitely an American president. I can give you that.
Is an American president?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And finally, how do people contact you? I mean, I guess LinkedIn is the obvious place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn, just by putting my name in, Lenny Woods. There's not loads of Lenny Woods around, so you should be able to find me. And I've got quite a distinctive green background image as well, so you should be able to find me, no problem. Otherwise, it's just marketingoutsource.co.uk.
Which I will put again below in the show notes.
Super. Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, Lenny, it's been a pleasure. You've been very, very you've given lots and lots of value to the listeners and viewers of the podcast.
That's that's always my objective, is to be as valuable as possible.
Yeah. And I appreciate your time. And
thank you.
I implore everyone to go and check out Lenny's website and LinkedIn. And if you need to outsource your services, your marketing services, that is, then Lenny's your man.
Thank you very much.
That's right. Cheers, Lenny. Have a good day.
Lovely. You too, Mike. Thanks very much.